Light the beam, because it's time for Nerdy for 30, the podcast where we talk about nerdy-ish movies for 30-ish minutes. My name is Kevin Bauer, a.k.a. The Critic's Choice. With me, as always, the people's champ, Tim Keck. And today, we are talking about Scott Pilgrim's newest anime, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off.
Kevin, how do you even describe this? I don't know what to say about this. It's an anime. It's like a cartoon anime about an alternate reality for Scott Pilgrim, where Scott Pilgrim dies, but really he is, transported through time. It's time travel, which is really good. And his old self pulls him out of the timeline. So you just hang out with all these other characters, and then it ends and everybody's friends, and it's like an alternate reality of what the original Scott Pilgrim movie was about. And I guess there were comic books for this too. I remember reading Scott Pilgrim. I watched the movie, and I still needed some reminders with this. Kevin, you're the Scott Pilgrim guy.
Yeah.
What did you think about this? What did it mean to you to have the gang back together again? They've got the same voice actors playing the same roles. They got the band back together. And what did it do for you, Kevin?
All the pieces were back together, Tim. And I've really thought about this a lot. I mean, to an embarrassing extent, Scott Pilgrim was part of my identity before this movie came out. And then after it came out, I mean, it was such a big thing for me and all my friends in school. And like, I've gone as Scott Pilgrim for Halloween. I have had posters, like friends of mine from college for my birthday made posters of some of the posters you can see in the background of this thing. I mean, like, visually, for stuff that I've done in my own projects, I've referred back to work that Edgar Wright and Brian Lee O'Malley have both done. Scott Pilgrim is a huge touchstone for me, in no small part because he's a big airhead and I can relate to that. But Tim, this did not hit. And I really wanted to challenge that because I could feel that a lot of that was the expectations that come from seeing something that you liked adapted into a new medium. And we've talked a ton off pod. I don't think we've talked about this very much on pod about how I don't really think an adaptation should be exact when you're moving something into another medium. Like, you need to lean into the strengths of that medium. That's what works so well about the movie versus the comic. The spirit was there for sure. The tone was there. But what Edgar Wright was doing to it really expanded things in this world and like really added to it. I think there was a ton of addition that happened in this. I think that there was a lot of stuff that I think it's like Studio Saru or like Science Saru is the name of the animation company behind it. They did another anime that's really great called Keep Your Hands Off Isaacin. And that anime is all about animation. So I think what they brought to this from an animation perspective is incredible. The sound was incredible. But at the end of the day, it didn't have the same sauce. It didn't have the same steam. A lot of the humor didn't hit for me. That's just my opinion. What this was not for me for the most part. How about you? How did you?
If it's not for you, it's definitely not for me, man. I don't know. I was also just thinking more about Scott Pilgrim. And I know how much Scott Pilgrim means to you. And Scott Pilgrim was, I hate to say this, maybe my Mission Impossible of just, I'm watching it and I'm like, this should mean more to me than it does. And it never really clicked. And I don't know if that's because it's more of like a video game culture, which doesn't really do it for me. I mean, it's not shitting on it, just it's not a world that interests me as much. And so I don't go back and play old games. I just don't care about that stuff. So when they're bringing that into the real world, it doesn't mean as much to me as, let's say, in Free Guy when he gets Captain America's shield and then Chris Evans is like, what the fuck? Like, that somehow hits harder for me than,
great moment.
Player One, Level Up, fight time, like fights. Like, I don't know. So I've always liked the first movie, didn't love it. And then this, I couldn't tell if it was bad or good, or it just went in one ear and out the other, man. I could have stopped watching at any point. I could have finished it. If we weren't doing it for the pod, it might have taken me like a few weeks to get through it. It was like as interesting as it was equally uninteresting, I think, the whole time. And it's fine. I mean, I had more fun thinking about the voice actors and them interacting, and they're kind of remixing these characters that weren't really flushed out in the original anyway.
Mhm.
And they're taking some pretty big leaps and stuff, and they've got some weird message about doing things for yourself, but it still revolves around a boy. Like, this doesn't pass the Bechdel test. And if we even still think about that, which I guess we don't, but they make a decision
As a culture, or you and me? I think
we never passed the Bechdel test. We're always talking about men, and we love our guys. And so up top, they make what I thought was a thief is Scott Pilgrim dies at the beginning. And in the first episode, I'm like, okay, so it's just Scott Pilgrim. They're just doing Scott Pilgrim again. And then as they go, things are happening a little too fast, where I'm like, oh, okay, so this is picking up, something's coming. And then Scott Pilgrim dies. And I was like, okay, now we're on to something. That's the end of the first episode. By the end of the second episode, Scott Pilgrim no longer dead. And I'm no longer interested, because shifting the focus to Ramona Flowers, who was just I don't know. They flush her out in the movie. I think Scott Pilgrim is good about getting into like the stupidity of like young relationships and, you know, the lack of communication or otherwise, or just being fucking stupid and not knowing what you want and running away from good things and being messy. And it'd be cool to flush out Ramona Flowers and just say, this is her story. This is her thing. She's discovering herself. She's battling her evil exes, and make it all about her. And instead, it ultimately comes back to Scott Pilgrim. And I would say a very disappointing way.
Right there.
What'd you think of that? What'd you think of that, like, kind of arc for Scott Pilgrim, I guess? Do you think it would have done better if they just focused more on Ramona?
Totally. I think that's one of the things too. I think I was really trying to shake myself for like how much that was just my expectations being thrown off too, when I thought this was going to be a straight up adaptation of the comics, because the movie is not exact. I mean, the comics weren't even done when the movie happened. So when they announced this, it was like, this feels kind of unnecessary. But to anybody there are a lot of people who don't like to read manga, they don't like to read comics, but they do like to watch anime. That's fine. So I thought this will be cool. This will be a chance to see the material from the comics get adapted. And I mean, it sounded perfect and the animation was perfect. So I was excited to see that. And then when he died, I was simultaneously excited, like you said, for the narrative possibilities, but then also kind of mourning what looked like it was going to be a perfect adaptation, which again, like, we've seen it a lot. Like, even watching that first episode, I felt a little bit bored because I've seen this a lot, but it would have been, I think, kind of the most refined version of this thing. So if they'd said instead, if this had been billed as like a Ramona Flowers story, if they had focused more in on Ramona, Scott is dead, stays dead, and she is not bizarrely focused on this guy that she had one okay date with. I guess there were sparks, and that's going to be our justification throughout the rest of the series. I think we get a lot better show. I'm interested in that. I would love to see multiple seasons of Ramona Flowers show like this. She's a stunt woman now. This is cool as shit. Like, there are some really, really cool ideas, but it's just buried in this really meandering story. And I think, Tim, it comes back to one of your big rules. There's no stakes. There's no stakes in this whole thing, because he was dead. And at the funeral, they keep the really flippant sense of humor for everyone. So nobody really cares that much that he's dead. They're all there. They're all wearing black, but they're all behaving like they know he's going to come back. But they're not saying they know he's going to come back. I feel like you could have kind of a fun respawn joke there or something. Yeah. And no, I did think having the coins in the casket was a fucking grade A bit. It's wonderful.
There's some great bits in this. There really are. There's some really good jokes.
There's also a lot of really bad ones.
Yeah.
Like, Scott does a not joke. Like, very old Scott at the end is like, oh, well, this is great. Not. And it's just like, what the fuck was that? Like, I know they dug up a lot of 80s video game references. They dig up a couple not jokes as well.
They just make him into such a loser. And I guess he kind of is a loser. But I mean, the story isn't kind of part of the influence of the Scott Pilgrim thing, like Mario rescuing Peach and like some sort of a disconnect of like, oh, there's this princess, but I don't really have a relationship with the princess. But the whole game is geared around this one MacGuffin, basically. They're just treating a woman like a MacGuffin and like just putting her at the end. And it's just that's the quest, that's the game, that's what you do. And that's how a lot of games are structured and a lot of stories are structured. But, you know, I don't know if I buy the idea that they kissed, there were sparks, and now we're going to time travel to the future where they've been together for 30 years. Like, kind of, I don't need that. I don't even fucking buy it. I don't necessarily buy that they're going to be together forever. And I don't necessarily think that's the story that Scott Pilgrim tells normally. But now all of a sudden it's like they're soulmates and they're intertwined. And then something happens that's so bad that once Scott's driven insane and comes back and does, and the time travel, you know, we just shit on, I just shit all over Loki for this time travel stuff. I can't sit here in good consciousness and say, well, you know, it was bad when Loki did it, but Scott Pilgrim really pulled it. I'm like, fuck that. It was bad. It was a bad idea when they first put pen to paper. It's not good. We need to stop time travel stuff. We need to stop multidimensional stuff. Stop time travel. It's not interesting. It's jumped the shark a million times.
The only way you can stop it is if you go back and prevent it from happening in the first place.
Yeah. Just don't watch it. Just don't turn it on. Boycott Loki, boycott Scott Pilgrim. I mean, why are we doing this? It's so stupid. Like, the big bad is Scott in the future because he had a miscommunication with his wife and then went into training for 10 years. I mean, it is like a commentary on these kinds of relationships and stuff.
Well,
and
do you think it's a commentary on like current culture too? Like, do you think that this is reflective? In a lot of ways, Brian Lee O'Malley, when the comic came out, and Edgar Wright, when the movie came out, they were commenting on modern trends. So do you think this is Brian Lee O'Malley taking another chance in 2023 to comment on the fact that time travel is used in this way and multiverses are used like this?
Maybe, but I mean, is that an original idea at this point?
I mean, not necessarily, but I don't think that also necessarily invalidates it all the way. But I do think when we tend to see those things, it's most effective when it is a story that we have seen a million times. We do not need to see Spider-Man's origin story anymore. We do not need to see Batman's origin story anymore. It's done. It's great. You know, cool. Great story. We don't need to see it again.
Have you ever once in your life wondered what happens to Ramona and Scott after the movie's over?
No, I think that's one of the big flaws. Because I would believe that
that's the whole question.
Up. But also, like, I do think that this tried to address some of that insofar as she is not a fleshed out character at all in the original source material. Like, this thing it's full of problems. A lot of it is very dated. They directly tried to take a lot of the stuff head on with like how many times people comment on the fact that Scott's dating a 17-year-old and it's gross, but they also like don't change it. Like, I noticed the movie, I went back and put the movie on. I noticed the movie changed his age from 23 to 22. So it's a 5-year age gap between he and Knives, because that's fine, apparently.
Yeah. Really strange call. But like, she's also 17. It's not an 18-year-old in high school. It's not like you're dating a high schooler who's like 18. He's dating a high schooler who's 17.
Yeah, if you're going to change the age of anybody, I mean, it's still weird. But
and also it's a 5-year gap. So it was never not weird. Nowhere, you know, when you're older, a 5-year gap, whatever. Once you're in your 20s, like, who cares? But at this point in their lives, when the oldest person is 22, it's never not been weird that they're hooking up. What is some dude swinging by, some high schooler is picking up his elementary school girlfriend? Like, that's what they're getting across. Like, weird. It's fucking weird, man. Ugh.
It's strange. They try to address a lot of that. And I think that's kind of where a lot of the problems come from, because we spend a lot of time with the exes, who, of anybody, I think would be the people that I least wanted to spend more time with. I would have loved to spend more time with Ramona alone. I would have spent more time with Julie, spent more time with Kim, spent more time with Steven Stills and Knives. Instead, we get a lot of time with these exes who were villains originally and are now being framed as just kind of silly guys. And there's a line toward the end where sometimes bad guys can turn into great guys. They also, a lot of the time, don't. Like, sometimes shitty people are shitty people and they stay shitty people. Like, it's strange to me that they went so far out of their way to pretty much immediately get rid of all the tension, immediately get rid of any of these guys being these toxic creeps that have been stalking Ramona since they dated for, in some cases, decades. And now they just all are kind of dimwits that we get to see a lot of little tiny jokes from. And that's where we're going to go with the series. The whole thing just really meandered because it couldn't figure out what it wanted to say about these people or what it wanted to do with them. And I really felt like we were wasting our time here.
I think I would have been pumped if they just run the whole thing back, like done basically the Scott Pilgrim movie, but Scott dies and Ramona steps up and fights all these guys.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, she's coping with her because they're her exes.
Exactly.
Why does he have to deal with her exes?
Exactly.
A modern take on it would be her dealing with her past and the fact that she now has to defeat these guys that she ultimately treated poorly. Like her and Scott are shitty people, you know?
Yeah. Oh, big time.
And it's a beautiful love story about two shitty people who found each other and have just left a trail of like, you know, misery in their wake. That is what is cool about Scott Pilgrim is like Scott is dating a high schooler and then he's playing in a band with like his longest time girlfriend and just completely neglects her the whole time. Also, it was just like dating the most famous woman on the planet. And then she destroyed him. And so then now I guess he's dating a rebound. And then he doesn't even talk to this high school girl that he's like spending time with. It's weird. And then all the stuff with Ramona just abandoning everybody. It's so messy and kind of fun. And I like that part, but we got distracted with all this ex bullshit. I don't know if I needed justifications from the exes. I don't think I needed their side of the story, really. We get it.
No. They wouldn't let anybody in this be a bad person. This was like playing Scott Pilgrim with kid gloves on. You can make it better. You can update a lot of stuff, but you can't get rid of the tension. Like you gotta we can still have the finale that's a happy ending and have everybody together for this fight scene facing off against future Scott. But we gotta earn those people being there. It just felt really unearned.
How much of that do you think is the success of the cast? Because to be fair, I think they've all probably peaked before 2023. But this cast is stacked. It's crazy. I mean, everyone on here, I just pulled up like the cast list or whatever, and it's like 10 deep with like people you would recognize or know in real life. And maybe part of the, you know, maybe if you want Mae Whitman to be involved, you've got to flesh out her character a little bit, you know, or like now Jason Schwartzman is like carrying this for some reason. It's interesting, but I don't know.
That could be. And I would argue that I would rather have the version of the show that is better crafted and better paced and doesn't have the actors from the movie, because it was really cool to have them, but I didn't need them. No. And I don't think any of them were exceptionally good voice actors. As great as all of them were in the live action movie, I adore them. I absolutely adore them in the live action movie. It's different. It's a different art form, acting with your voice versus acting in person.
Yeah, I don't know if there was any voice actors that really stood out to me as like great.
I've got one who is my pick for the person that has not peaked yet. Ellen Wong. Every time I watch Scott Pilgrim, I'm like, Ellen Wong, Knives. She's so good. And she does that little like, anytime she does that little like tremor in her voice, like, wow, it's so funny. And it's so like well tuned in. She's locked in, man. You're
right. She is good. When I pulled up the cast list, she's number one on this list. So really? I was kind of like, she must be known. She's like got first billing on Google, which I'm like, there must be more stuff that she's doing that I'm not aware of, because she's over Michael Cera and Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Chris Evans, Brie Larson.
Oh, wow.
She was in Glow, Bestsellers, The Void. I don't know what any of these are. Silent Night, The Carrie Diaries. I mean, I don't know what it is that's given her this bump. The Carrie Diaries,
The Void. That is a tough movie.
Glow.
It's got incredible creature effects. The Void, incredible.
I got halfway through it and like quit.
Man, yeah, it's shot bad.
I got halfway through and I had to go home. What about? Gosh, I was trying to. I made notes of like Beefs and Thieves, and I've talked about everything. I mean, I don't even know what else to say about this. Like, I just didn't find this very interesting at all. This whole
you want me to pop off?
Interesting. I would love for you to pop off. You got to carry this one, Kev, because this is your passion project.
Pop, pop, baby. It's magnitude time. I think the sound in this was fucking phenomenal. The animation was great. The sound was unreal. The music they picked, like Anamataguchi curated this. Also, the circularity, is that even a word? The circular nature of the way that they approached this, bringing in people from different aspects of the Scott Pilgrim past. Anamataguchi is a chiptune band that did the music for the video game adaptation of the comic that came out at the same time as the movie. So they have already done the soundtrack for a Scott Pilgrim property, and it's fantastic. It's super good. They are also just a great band in and of themselves. So to have them do the musical direction of this piece, fucking inspired. The opening credits music, wonderful. All of the new Sex Bomb songs, wonderful. They fit right in. The fact that they got those people to do the voices for it again, awesome.
Were those all new songs?
The only, yeah, I think they're all new. I don't think
they have that
the old ones in the music.
Didn't they do one of the old ones like at the concert or something?
No, they did. That was a brand new one at the concert, and I Feel Fine is a new one. But I Feel Fine is also, it's an inversion of We Are Sex Bomb. So like, We Are Sex Bomb. It's and I Feel Fine goes so it's
that's
like
cool.
A fun inversion of the thing.
Yeah.
Metric. So I loved this move from the movie, where if you're gonna have a band in a movie that has like a hit single, unless you've got just an absolute dinger in your pocket, I love the move of taking an existing really good single from an indie band that a lot of people haven't heard of and just having that be the song in the movie. The Princess Diaries did it with the band Rooney, which is one of my favorite bands, and they had the lead singer Rooney there as the guy. They used the song by the band Metric, but they had Brie Larson sing it because she's Envy Adams in the movie. And then Brie Larson didn't do the vocals for this. So when they did that cover of I Will Remember You, it was Metric just with the original Metric lead singer. Like that kind of stuff is all so cool, the way they brought it all back. The sound effects for the little motions everybody does, like it sounded almost like Animal Crossing sound effects anytime anybody like blinked or moved their feet or anything like that. It's just really, really cool.
It is so cool, and it makes it weird. I mean, I'm a story guy. You like all these details. It's wild to me when people make these big projects, and it's clearly people who are passionate about this stuff. They get the right people involved. It looks good. I don't know if it looks great for what I want to see from like an anime fighting standpoint, but I think it looks cool and unique and feels like Scott Pilgrim, and the music, it sounds great. And then the story is just like completely fucked. It's so weird when everything, like the packet, it's like getting a beautifully wrapped Christmas present. And then you open it up and it's just, a calculator for the fourth year in a row. And you're like, I don't need this. It's a pocket. But your grandma, she doesn't remember things very well. And she just keeps getting you calculators because she remembers you did bad at math in college. It was your 1B in elementary school. And so now she just gives you calculators all the time. She has a phone. She doesn't know how to use it. She doesn't realize it's a calculator as well. And, and then you just look at your family and you laugh and you smile and you try and pretend it's okay. And that's what Scott Pilgrim reminds me of. A beautiful package that we all have to tell ourselves is okay.
Yeah. You know what it reminded me of is Across the Spider-Verse.
I was just going to say that. You read my mind.
Man.
Same exact thing. Yeah. Same exact thing.
For this, everything aligned perfectly. I should have loved this. They even brought in Will Forte. My hero, Will Forte.
Your hero, Will Forte?
I love Will Forte.
I didn't know about this.
Will Forte is a massive, massive influence on any comedy I've ever done.
The Last Man on Earth. I should have seen it from a mile away.
That's the guy.
He's funny, man. But is Mary Elizabeth Winstead doing the same voice for older Ramona?
I think so. Yeah.
So then why is older? It was an interesting choice, I thought, to give older Scott a different voice actor.
And like a very different voice actor. I love Will. He did not match up very well.
No.
I think I would have preferred for it to be Michael Cera still, as much as I love the Forte.
Me too. I mean, if he was a separate villainous character or something, that would have been some. The future world made no sense to me, right?
Yeah.
Like they get to the future and there's grass is overgrowing everything, and then they're in nice homes, and there's like no war that's going on, like nothing happened. There's no fighting. They could just still use the playground if they wanted, but for some reason they're locked inside and doing nothing.
Like
I don't get
masks too.
Were they wearing breathing masks?
Yeah, they were wearing everybody was wearing like really high tech breathing masks when they were outside. In the bus, when they got on the bus, there was some sort of like an intense jet blast of air for Scott to get on the hover bus. So something seems going on.
Yes, there's some sort of a virus that justifies it, I guess, but I don't know. It just seemed like generic space world generic future world that was like, fine, all right. I guess it's cool they don't address it, but yeah.
Dude, we were talking about this. Lauren and I were talking about this when the Planet of the Apes trailer came up this past weekend. So I think overgrown post-apocalyptic cities are going to be what people identify with this time period. The same way that for the 80s, it's like sunglasses and that kind of like neon font, like a grid background and Terminators and like warehouses, like that whole like warehouses at night. That's like an 80s movie staple. That for the 2020s, it's gonna be overgrown apocalyptic scenarios.
You think people, 100 years from now, are going to look back and check out our obsession with this overgrown alternative future, like, Walking Dead, like other movies that have done this? It does feel like a thing. I mean, it is like, oh, everything goes to shit. Our society collapses, and then nature comes back and nature revives itself. And it is weird that we've all just decided that's what the future is.
Oh, for sure.
We all get eliminated, and then the planet takes over again, and we're exterminated like that. It is interesting. Yeah. It's weird that that's the specific vibe for this.
The first to go will be the groundkeepers. We didn't know it, but they were the first line of defense.
There's no point in mowing your lawn if a zombie's going to run through it, mess it all up. Gosh,
we just couldn't get there with like the Roomba version of a lawnmower. Just barely, just couldn't quite get there before the robot apocalypse.
Yeah. Hopefully before the robot apocalypse, we get robot maids like working.
Right.
We need to figure out how to survive. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. One that like doesn't need the internet, just runs on solar power.
No.
Disconnected, can't be influenced by other robots. And just does its job.
If this thing discovers the internet, fuck. If the Jetsons made, I want to see a post-apocalyptic Jetsons, where the premise is that the Jetsons found the internet. This just feels like a Black Mirror episode at this point.
Could be. Wait, they discover the internet? Like what if it's a robot cut off from the internet and then their eyes are open? Now you can have like a robot messiah who is connecting severed robots to the internet.
Oh my God. It's the one that happened to guess the Wi-Fi password. So it's the only one that has access.
Yeah, it's the only one that had the code. Or you know what? The Wi-Fi password is like written on the back of his neck or something.
Oh my God.
Because somebody wrote it on it remind him.
My printer's got one right on the back. My printer can't see it. But if mirrors were positioned right.
I feel like I saw some anime thing where it was like that, where it's like, oh, you can't look at the back. Oh, it's like then they're running society, and it's like you can't look at the back of you can't look at their back. You'll see the tattoo and the ancient scriptures written there, and then they just have long hair to cover it, and then it just reveals to be the Wi-Fi password. Gosh, this could be a script. Robot Messiah is a comic that's coming out from us, Nerdy for 30. In how long do we need for this? 2023. We can get it done this year.
Sure. Yeah.
If they threw this Scott Pilgrim thing together in a couple months, we can do this.
It's going to be a comic that comes out this year, and then about 20 years from now, it's going to be a Netflix adaptation that is okay.
I'm reading an MCU book right now by one of some of the Ringer people.
Oh yeah,
and it's kind of talking about
this book.
Yes, and they're talking about the history of the MCU, and I've barely made a dent in it, but they were already talking about the success of Iron Man and how they followed it up with Iron Man 2, and it's all the stuff I always thought of with like stand-up comics too, where like, you know, Ron White puts out an album and a special and it's awesome. He's crushing, and it's like, oh, that crushed because it's 10 years worth of work and energy and effort that he put into on the road. Like he put time and passion into that, and then it does well, and then Comedy Central's like, hey, can you do another one in 2 years or 6 months? I think he had one that was like in a year or something crazy short. And he's like, sure, I have to because of all this money, but then it's just not, it can't be as good because you haven't spent that much time on it. And apparently the same thing happened with Iron Man 2, where they were like, okay, Iron Man 2 is coming out in 2 years, and they hadn't even signed on Favreau or Downey yet. And then they closed the deal with them, and Favreau was just stressed out of his mind for 2 years, cramming in Iron Man 2. And then he's just never done another MCU thing because he's like, I can't take this. Is too much. Iron Man was like a passion project, you know, for the first one. And then the second one, it was too much going on in too short a period of time. And, you know, it felt a little rushed. And I think you can kind of see that on screen in Iron Man 2.
Wow. I like
so
Iron
it's
Man
interesting
2,
to me when it's like this Scott Pilgrim thing. Does this feel similarly rushed? I think that works for like that Across the Spider-Verse, right? Where we're talking about that. Yeah. There's something about that feels rushed. And the Scott Pilgrim thing, I'm wondering if it feels kind of rushed from like a writing standpoint, but also I don't think there was a rush for this movie. Like this was the kind of thing that had no timeline. Nobody needed this. So why does it feel rushed? Why not take another year and like write a good script? I don't know. I just wonder how much of that other stuff came into it. Because there's so many things that happen behind the scenes with all these movies where we're like, you know, they're cramming it in. They don't have time. It's like SNL. We're like, SNL sucks. But like, that's because they're like trying to do it all in a week. And, you know, that's part of the charm. Part of the charm is that SNL isn't good because it's so rushed. You know, they could like just take the summer and write and make something of quality, but that's not the premise. That's not the show, you know? Mm-hmm. And I guess Scott Pilgrim is the SNL of animes. I don't know. I guess I just wanted to brag that I was reading a book.
Sure, dude.
Want to work that in there.
Noted. I think so. I do think that SNL has been really good this season, and I also think that a lot of this is Brian Lee O'Malley because he wrote the series in addition to the comic. I mean, he wrote this. He's a credited writer on every single episode. I think a lot of the content in this is him grappling with this thing that brought him to fame. And there's so much talk in the piece about adaptation and of grappling with things that you did in your past. And I think that a lot of things he changed about the characters and things that made the characters bad people are things that he has some regrets around. But that's also part of making the work. Being a perfect person is not part of what makes your art interesting. So it's tough. I recognize, obviously, this is like a valid artistic expression from him reflecting on his past. I think your Ron White comparison is apt because I think there's a hunger, there's an electricity, there's an energy in making something when you have no pressure on you because nobody's looking at you and you're just hungry to do something to prove yourself and break through. And then once you've already done it, it's the struggle that so many people who find huge success face, which is, what do you do now? Like, what do you do when your reality doesn't look like the reality of all the people that you are creating art for anymore? You become Jay-Z and you put out albums in the Guggenheim, and that's what you do. But what do you do, listener? Let us know. nerdy430@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back here again next week with an episode on Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. You're not going to want to miss this one. It's on Netflix. Check it out. We'll see you then. Till then, stay nerdy, everybody.
Stay nerdy. Bye.
Bye.
I don't know. If I'd ever put out an album with Linkin Park, I think I'd coast after that.
You could argue he did.
I think he did.